An imam from a mosque embroiled in extremist controversy has spoken out about the riots that took place after the Southport attack. Ashraf Dabous accused Zionists of manipulating and misguiding anti-immigration rioters, saying that supporters of Israel want Muslims to be vilified.
They are being misled, and they are being manipulated, and they are being misguided by individuals who do not have their best interests at heart. It is quite well known now, publicly, due to information that has been released online, that their manipulators are Zionists.
The Imam from Lewisham Islamic Centre's comments have been echoed elsewhere. Press TV, Iran's state-funded channel, made similar accusations where they linked rioters to what they called the Zionist entity, meaning Israel. Dabous said riots, which erupted over the country after Southport, were fueled by misinformation spread by Israel supporters. Labelling rioters as prejudiced, he went on to say they'd been misled by individuals who do not have their best interests at heart. He continued, "It's quite well known publicly, due to information that has been released online, that their manipulators are Zionists and they are supporters of Israel. With ground that has been lost over the few months, something had to take place that would try to win some ground back for the Zionist agenda. What a better way than to paint the Muslims being savages and killers and barbaric, which in reality is a projection of the Zionist state itself." The mosque is no stranger to controversy. Back in 2016, a High Court judge found its head Imam Shakil Beg to have endorsed extremist positions and encouraged religious violence. The judge warned the Imam could plant the seed of Islamic extremism in a young mind. Beg has remained in post as head Imam at the Lewisham Islamic Centre despite this ruling, and has regularly hosted school children from the local borough. The mosque received hundreds of thousands of pounds of government funding for its school, which closed in 2019 and still has ties to the local council. The BBC had identified the Imam as an extremist. He then sued the corporation for libel. A judge ultimately ruled in the BBC's favour. The judge concluded that he had been telling Muslims that violence in support of Islam would constitute a man's greatest deed. Beg remains head Imam and fully engaged in the community despite these rulings. The mosque's Facebook page shows it has hosted children from local schools, including primary-age kids, on at least half a dozen occasions in the past couple of years. Police even testified to assist Beg in his libel case against the BBC. They highlighted his so-called principled stance against Prevent, the counter-extremism programme. A Met Police spokesperson said, "Beg does not hold an advisory role with the Met. He attended a faith breakfast alongside representatives from other religious backgrounds. These events are part of our critical engagement work to understand the effect of policing on all of our communities. The main focus of this particular event was a discussion around the Stop and Search Charter. An attendee's presence at an event does not amount to our support for their views. We do not condone any views which encourage division." The Prevent programme opposed by Beg was introduced to try to catch extremism early, to prevent radicalisation. Since 2015, those working in education or health have a duty to report those they deem at risk of radicalisation. NHS staff and teachers undergo training to help them spot the signs. Yet extremism still proliferates and authorities often find it difficult to crack down. The most notorious case would be that of infamous hate preacher Anjem Chowdhury, who has finally been jailed for life. Nigel Farage had this after Chowdhury was sentenced.
Quite often on this show, we say, why did someone get such a ridiculously light sentence? Well, today, maybe it's the other way. The hate preacher Anjem Chowdhury has been sentenced to 28 years in prison. I'm joined by Chris Phillips, former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Unit. Chris, this is a pretty remarkable term, isn't it? What's happening here?
Nigel, it's a real satisfaction to see a man like this locked away for so long. You know, to some, he's a pathetic groomer of people to go and commit terror. But actually, he's also really, really nasty man who, because of his articulate ways and ability to speak to the camera, has got away with his actions for so long. He's been out, he's been preaching deliberately to people to go and do exactly as we've seen yesterday in Lancashire. This man is evil.
Well, hang on. Chris, hang on. We don't know the direct link here yet. So,
No link to this one in particular, but this is what this is the sort of thing that he's been preaching to his people to do.
Yeah. Who makes the decision that suddenly the judiciary give out a sentence as long as this? Do they act on advice from the Home Secretary? How does the whole process really work?
Yeah, well, I think there has been a push towards particular judges seeing particular cases and with advice on sentencing. And there must have been, because this is an exceptional sentence, Nigel, as you've said already. But actually, you know, this man is dangerous. And, you know, we don't know exactly how many people have died as a result of his preachings.
No, fair point. Last thought on this, Chris. You know, we're told very often that in our prisons we have a demoralised prison service, very demoralised. The old lags all retiring, youngsters without much experience replacing them. That in many prisons, those that want to preach extremism, Islamist ideology taking over wings of various prisons. Is there a danger that Chowdhury actually could convert many more people to violent causes inside prison?
Yeah, but there is some control over who he can talk to in prisons. I'd say you're absolutely right. I mean, he will preach to whoever he thinks will go and do his dirty deeds for him. And of course, prison is an exceptional way of controlling those people that are close to him. They have got now prisons which can segregate people like him to stop him from preaching. But he does remain a real danger to society.
Yeah. Well, Chris Phillips, friend of the programme, thank you as ever for coming on. Well, I've never seen Chris Phillips as happy as that.
43% of cases taken on by Channel, the government's de-radicalisation programme to which preventer referrals are made, were for right-wing extremism, highlighting Britain's growing problem with sectarian violence. Last month, riots erupted across the country after 3 little girls were killed at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class. The action menaced the streets of Britain for 2 weeks. While rioters were a small but violent section of the population, many Brits blame the riots on anxiety about mass immigration. Matt Goodwin told GB News.
Immigration is now the #1 issue in the country. So it's above the economy, it's above the NHS, it's above crime. That's a remarkable thing, given that we're in a very severe cost of living crisis. The NHS is collapsing and crime is visibly been bearing down on people. For the Brits to say, actually, no, immigration is my top concern, it gives you a sense of where the public mood is. And the other thing I would say is this weekend we got some other evidence from pollsters like Opinium too, which not only show that Keir Starmer's leadership ratings have collapsed since the election last month, and they really have. I mean, his net leadership rating is down 26 points with that pollster. But they also asked Brits, well, what do you think about immigration today? 66% said immigration is too high. And then they were asked, well, what do you think about how immigration has impacted the economy, has impacted public services, and has impacted our cultural life? And a larger number of Brits said it's impacted those things negatively than the number who said it's impacted those things positively. So what I would argue is the Brits are becoming more concerned about immigration. They're becoming more sceptical about immigration at exactly the same time as Labour are now pushing the pedal down on mass immigration.
May I just make the point that people were asked in this survey a number of different questions about, essentially, to what extent do you think that each of the following is or is not responsible for the unrest we've seen? Lots of people, 75% saying far-right organisations are responsible, 73% saying social media companies are, 64% saying the UK's immigration policy, so yes, a large chunk saying that was to blame. It goes on, previous Conservative government, 53, traditional football news organisations, 51, football supporters, 33.
Emily, can
so
I
it's quite a range of different issues that people think are at the bottom of this.
But can I just press back on one thing here, which is In a lot of these surveys about the riots, we have had people saying, oh, it's about the far right, or it's about, I don't know, figures like Tommy Robinson or politicians, like Nigel Farage, who I would not consider to be far right, by the way. Well, why are those figures in British politics? Those figures are in British politics because of these widespread concerns over broken borders, mass migration and segregation in communities. So I just don't think what we might call the mainstream conversation about these disturbances has been accurate. I think, as I have kept saying since these riots erupted, the blunt reality is many people no longer feel safe in Britain, and that is why they reacted.
And it's quite possible to say to have ticked both the far-right organisation box and also the immigration policy box as well.
Yeah.
Because with these things, there are always multifactorial.
Matt, in previous polls, time and time again, same at the ballot box, people have voted for less migration and they've only got more. So in this latest poll, what has changed? Are people, on average, more concerned about migration, even more than they were previously?
Yeah.
And if so, why is that?
Yeah, so the first thing to say is, yes, people are much more concerned about immigration than they used to be. That's why it's the #1 issue in the country today. The second thing to say is, if you look at, for example, long-term, what we call trackers of public opinion, regular surveys that have been asked by people like YouGov, what they show over time is that the number of people who think immigration has been too high is now at a record high. The number who think it's about right has been falling. The number who think it's having a negative impact on the country has been rising. The number who think it's having a positive impact has been falling. So if we just take a step back and look at the longer-term trends, basically what I think has happened is, from 2010 onwards and through that Brexit referendum, and in 2017, 2019, we've had politician after politician after politician saying we will lower the overall numbers and take back control of the borders, only to do the very opposite of those things, to basically put mass migration on steroids. And this includes Starmer's government. I argued this morning, I think his ratings are collapsing, partly because he said to the Brits, look, I will smash the gangs. Well, already we have record numbers of illegal migrants coming into the country on the small boats. We've now got, I think, over 131,000 people in total since 2018. Starmer's also liberalising legal migration. He's increasing migration from Afghanistan. He's getting rid of the salary thresholds. He's making it easier for relatives of migrants to come in. He's doing the opposite, basically.
The police seem to have difficulty in dealing with extremists while keeping community tensions from boiling over. This has led to a rise in what has been called sectarianism in British politics, which has really reared its head since Israel took action in Gaza after the October 7th Hamas attacks. Israel and Gaza have now become a key dividing line in British politics, though the impact of the war here in Britain is very limited. Begg's comments illustrate Labour's reliance on the Muslim vote, which means the UK has become less supportive of Israel since Keir Starmer took power.
Richards, the Labour Party under increasing pressure from the left, 4, maybe 5 candidates elected as independents on Gaza positions, a fear that as the next few years go by, more votes might go that way. And certainly after the riots at the weekend, those divisions, sadly bigger than ever before. Is this Labour rather giving in on Israel?
Well, these decisions can't be driven by demos or even politics in that sense. They are big geopolitical decisions about the future of the Middle East, but also Britain's place in the world, which is why I would agree with your point about it being policy-led and evidence-led and not politics-led. And we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that Israel is our ally and is under attack on 3 fronts, and it needs to defend itself.
Yes, and interestingly, one of the UN agencies, the UNWRA, some of their operatives were actually directly involved in the massacres that took place on the 7th and the barbarism that took place on the 7th of October. We learned that the Labour Party is once again going to have the taxpayer funding that organisation.
That was one of the first decisions that they took, despite the accepted evidence now by the UN of complicity of UNRWA employees. But the complicity of this UN organisation in terrorism before the 7th of October as well as on it has been a matter of public record for some time. It's been the subject of reports by UN Watch. The Israelis have estimated some 450 employees of UNRWA are in fact linked to a terrorist organisation, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, to name just 2. So in those contexts, the fact that now taxpayer-funded support is being sent to an organisation that has, unfortunately, Nigel, as its raison d'etre, the perpetuation of the conflict, the content of UNRWA textbooks and UNRWA-run schools to encourage
It is
terrorism
alarming. It is
of this
alarming.
nature.
Andrew Rosendale, of course, won't be surprised by this at all.
No, the whole thing is alarming. I rather feared that a Labour government would take this type of approach. I fear for Israel. Israel is a democratic country. It's part of the free world. And if we don't stand with Israel and we allow extremists and terrorists and outside organisations, Iran to fund Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis are now getting involved, this is very dangerous situation for Israel. And I think the ultimate objective with these people is to push Israel out, to obliterate Israel. And that's what really worries me. So Labour is playing into their hands.
Nicholas Dunning, GB News.